full zone of it, so I think he just pressed the play button there. So games and play.
Yeah.
Where do you stand on that?
Games and play. Gosh, you told me I had like a broad context there.
Yeah, 3 for 6.
Games and play. I find that games can really teach you about yourself, and so playing has just been, for me as a child, how I interfaced with play was just ways to keep myself entertained because I was always alone.
Oh.
You know, so
you consider yourself all right, simple, boy days or girl days?
Alone I think was girl days. When I was out with more people, I think it was more boy days.
Okay.
Because I was trying to, I guess, maybe get respect from the boys in some ways.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so
as a girl, I think what tends to happen a lot that talk to girls is your parents keep us inside. We're not allowed to go outside and play with the rest of them. We are taught certain behaviors and certain things, and oftentimes it's like, but I want to do that too, you know. And I found in my case, my family was very, very, very particular. Many people meet me know that, and no one saw me. I was usually very much indoors, and so as ways to entertain myself, I would make up like games and point systems to get myself to do things. If it meant like to eat food, I would invent a game around it that give me point systems to make myself eat my own vegetables and stuff.
Okay, all right. Elaborate on that one.
So, like, for example, it's going to sound really weird. When I was small, roti used to make me sleepy.
Serious?
Yeah.
Chicken or roti, or just like curry in general?
Just like roti, and it had a dal on the side. I don't know, I used to look at it and it used to make me sleepy. So I used to make up in my head. I had like these many people I had to feed, and I had to and so like every piece I would like, how quickly can I like pick up the potato with the pumpkin, and if I put pumpkin I get extra points, and I'll try to eat it, and like it'll keep me engaged so that I would just finish. And
were these little people in your mouth?
They were in my head. They were in my mouth and in my head at the same time, you know, like it was like, okay, there's a little family coming to this little roti drive-thru, and I'm gonna have to like serve them roti pieces.
So you were playing like Overcook in your head?
In my head, that makes sense, yeah.
Okay.
And so it was like other little games like that I would make up for like really mundane things, just I guess to escape and find some sort of entertainment in my life. And as my parents grew as well, I got more access to things, and I had an older cousin, and he had brought down like a PS4. What am I saying? A PS2, sorry.
Okay.
I'm like, whoa, I just time jumped there. Yeah, and
so your first console was a PS2? Yeah,
because all video games I used to play before, it used to be within this home church setting. So this is gonna sound funny too. We had my parents used to go to this church. It's a home church. It's a Pentecostal church, and we as the young kids, it was probably like 8 of us as kids maybe, and we would wait for the adults to kind of get finished with their praise and worship stuff, and when they were done, they would move all the couches aside and we'd pull up the TV. And yeah, this was old school games. It was like we were playing Mario and Duck Hunt. And I remember the whole congregation would watch us. We were there with the little gun, like, playing Duck Hunt. And they would join in. And I found that was a really fun way that, like, I found connected to the adults around me, because then they were playing with us. They were kind of engaging with what I like to play. So
that was really interesting, because when I don't have much church days, but I do have church days. Our church had an internet cafe right below the church.
Wow.
Yeah, we were advanced for ghetto culture, like. But it was funny because the games we used to play in that cafe were like violent, like gory shooters and all that stuff. But
that's the irony, right?
Yeah, that was like fun irony. It's just like the above is your church, you go in your ceremonies and all that stuff, and then below now you're just going around shooting men, killing men. And it's like,
yeah.
and the pastor didn't really notice, and everything just overlooked, and it's like, yeah, I'm just like, wow, churches really don't know games.
Yeah.
And that was like something.
I think that's really interesting because I never really met anyone that like shared that exact experience. After morning was weird, you know, like you had a church and we used to play video games. I mean,
we're not that bad. You had a gun shooting ducks, and you have people watching you doing it.
Yeah, and they were enjoying it because some congregation would join in with us. So like the cognitive dissonance didn't obviously pick up on me at that time, but you know, I guess this didn't seem to matter. You know, it's these little pixels on the screen. Who cares? That's the mentality, I guess, you pick up from it. And yeah, I think church is its own kind of trauma. So.
I have too much stories about that. That's a next podcast. That's a next series on the whole.
Yeah.
But we're all focusing on games and the way we play as we grow up. So fast forward now. We past your church now. We're on your PS2.
Yeah. Okay. So I just kind of got hand-me-down games, basically. I don't think my parents were too into like buying games for me. It was just like, well, it's here. And so I had like 2 games at the time. It was like NBA and
NBA Street or just?
Oh yeah, I had NBA Street and I had I can't remember the other one. I had 2 NBA, but I always remember Street because I like that one. And I had Crazy Taxi.
Vibes.
Yeah.
I had Crazy Taxi too, but I didn't have a PS2. I had a Dreamcast, and it wasn't even my Dreamcast. It was my cousin's Dreamcast that I borrowed for a very extended period of time because they eventually got
Never got it back.
No, I can't even remember where that went. But I had Sonic and I had Crazy Taxi, and those are my 2 games. I was never really a Sonic fan, but Sonic was bad for the Dreamcast.
Yeah, for me, games, apart from what I had, the other ways I get to interface with it is by going by like boyfriends. Okay, I didn't have no boyfriends, but you know, male friends as a child.
It's nameless. We don't know who you are, so you can go ahead and...
And like as a child, I'm talking about like 8, 9, 10, 11. Yeah, I remember like if I wanted to play a game, I tended to have to go by a friend, and so by the same church family and stuff. Like he had Sonic, and that's where I got to play Sonic. By him, he had like Mario. He had all those games. I used to go by him just so I get to play games. But back on home, my PS2, what game really stood out to me, and what was an experience for me was I apparently had this uncle or cousin that worked on this game. He made the music. He was a musician, and they just handed me this game, right? And I was like, your uncle worked on this, so he gave it to you for free. I'm like, I never met this uncle. I don't know who he is. But obviously, I'm like, okay, let me play this game and see what it's about. It was a 3D platformer. It was called Tasmanian Tiger. I don't think many people knew that game, because anyone I talked to was just like, what? It fell definitely in the realm of like, you know, Spyro and Crash Bandicoot, those kind of games. It was, I guess, maybe one of those, I don't want to say knockoff because I love that game too much to call it a knockoff, but it was like in the realm of that genre. Everyone was making a game like that in that time, early 2000s, but it was made by like an Australian studio. So I played that game, like non-stop. The story, it taught me things about Australian culture I didn't even realize till later. You know, I know about emus and Cassiopeia's birds and all this kind of stuff, and like I spent hours in that game. When I beat the game, there was a segment on the making of the game, and I watched that hoping to see my uncle. This wasn't uncle. I'm watching it. I don't know what he looks like, but I'm just assuming he's a black man. So I'm looking for a black man in the video. I'm like, okay, no, I don't see him. Okay, I see a kind of like light-skinned dude. I don't know if that's him. And I'm like watching to see and looking through the credits. Like, I don't know. But because I watched it so many times, I had to realize, wait a minute, this looks cool. I like this process. You know, I got to watch, you know, the wireframe characters and when they were drawing on a tablet with the art.
Early 2000 games. Yeah, wow, that would have been intense, that process.
Yeah, I just saw this whole studio room of people on computers, and you know, some people doing art, drawing on a little tablet thingy. And and here's a kicker for me. They had a scene where they brought in stack of pizzas, like yay tall, super tall, and I was like, yep, they get pizzas in the office. I want that. And like in my head, I adopted that I want to be a game developer. Like I want to make games.
Okay.
So I always kept it in the back of my head. Like I like the world that these games immerse me in, and I wanted to create my own. And I didn't know how, but I always kept it in my mind going forward in school. And it was, I guess, exploring, different media later on, theater and film.
That's interesting because for me, as my journey for game development, I left it in the back of my mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For me, when I grew up, I played so much of games and I used to love to tinker. Like my real game was Lego. I had a Lego set that was meant for like a 10-year-old when I was 13, but that my ingenuity with that Lego set was on point. I used to build like biometrical hands. I used to kind of see how far I can push my limits with these blocks. And games I used to play then, for me, it was like, I was realistically, like, I'm from Trinidad. I'm from this Caribbean island.
Mm-hmm.
There's a very slim chance for me to be a game developer. But if I ever had the opportunity, I will take it.
Yeah.
But that but that still led me to explore other segments of art, other segments of expression, other segments of creativity.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it was like really interesting how you had it in your foreground. Like, yeah, this is my focus. For me, and I had it in my background. It's like, I don't really have it as my focus, but if I had the opportunity, I'll take it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like
I think for me it jumped back and forth because I remember like being like 8 years old and was like, that's what I want to do. I mean, focus on that. And then I think later on in life kind of realizing, I don't know how it went to the back. And as I explored other things, it because I'm only now really getting into it. It took a while before I got to realize, it's possible. Because things like these fields, arts and stuff, they're often relegated to the unpaying professions. Don't think about that. So all throughout school, it wasn't something that I could have focused on. I would tell some of my family and they would just like laugh at me, and it affects your psyche too, because you're like, that's what you said there, I'm from Trinidad, the small island. It's like we kind of have this mentality already that we can't do certain things because of where we are.
Yeah,
and that holds us back so much. I know it held me back too, even though we see that this success is something that is possible, there's a lot of more obstacles for us across here,
Yeah, I think what was interesting for me was that I had a rebellious streak, and I was a very passionate child. I loved art, even though I sucked at it, but I kept going at it. And anytime my journey was through the art fields, and I said I want to be an artist, I want to do all that stuff, every one of my parents would have always said, "But how would you make money off of that?" And I understood why they say it, but I still hated it, in the sense that it was never about the money. It was about their passion. It was about the experience. I will make the money after I make the painting, after I make wherever I settle myself in this arts field, the content would be sold, because I see that as making content and stuff. And only now I can say those things because, again, I fall now into game development where what I initially thought wasn't impossible now is possible. Because again, we keep moving forward, we keep growing, technology starts to evolve faster and faster, and you start to understand that these things, it's just the level of work you're willing to put on. Like if you're really serious about chasing your dreams.
Yeah, it's a lot more work than most people think, but it's true. I think my parents, they sort of allowed me to kind of explore what I wanted. They didn't tell me that I had to be something, so I'm grateful for that. But I lived with my grandparents, and they were still very traditional people, so I had that kind of war in the house too, of like which path do I choose as well. But I do think that their encouragement, it was mixed. They encouraged me, but like at the same time it was like still do school, just to be safe. So it creates that sort of dichotomy in your mind, like, well, what I'm doing isn't safe, and it all becomes just you figuring it out and constantly trying to figure it out.
See troubleshooting, trial and error, seeing how it works.
I want to take it back to, we were talking about boy days, girl days, right? So like there were some of those games that I used to like engage in that I consider my boy days, because like I would want to play with the guys around me. But I'm remembering like my dad was really into computers and stuff growing up, so I got all his his tech stuff hand me down. So I remember the big CRT monitors. I had one of those
Nice.
at like 10, I think. And he used to buy me like CD games. And I remember like they had all kind of different games. What really stood out to me was Barbie games. I had those Barbie games. I know you're gonna laugh. Is why? Because that's a thing. You tell a guy you're gonna laugh at Barbie games.
I mean, dollies is a serious thing, you know.
It is. When I looked at it, I actually found back it on YouTube. I was so surprised. I was like, oh, this
How
is like
bad does it
intense
look now?
nostalgia. It was like it's bad, but it's at the same time I saw how it helped direct my path. Right. So there was this game. It was Barbie, but she was all teaching me about how to make a movie. Right?
Okay.
It was like you design backgrounds, you animate the characters, you go into the editing suite, you write the script, you add the music. And I was like, this is what I was doing? Okay. You know, like little Bobby was teaching me that at a young age and I didn't even know. And I had obviously ones like, you know, girls dress up games and just like things like that. And I was like exploring, you know, the way that games tell things about a personality. You know, you have like the achiever, the explorer, I think the socializer, and then the fighter. And there's certain of those games that fit into that. Like the little games work within like the socializing. Because I think you go from Barbie to then like things like Sims, right?
Oh, wow. I know Sims is a whole paradigm of like every gamer girl that I've ever encountered always say they play Sims.
Yeah, I love Sims. I play like a wide range of games, but I absolutely love Sims,
Yeah,
right?
that's exactly what I encounter. Any girl who's into video games.
Right? And like Sims is, I feel like we have to defend back that Sims is a video game. Sims is a very complex designed video game. If you look at it from a software standpoint, right? And even within the game, I think it's fun because maybe these girls like to manage things. And like in Sims, you're managing like everything, you know, from life. You get to control life and be as a woman. I could totally expand upon it about what life means to women. I don't know. But like, yeah, there's just something about being able to maybe play out a fantasy within Sims that we would play out with our Barbie dolls. You know, we'd have like a whole household or adventures or everything with it, because it was a way to sort of expand our imagination, but with little tools.
So I'll have to share a story with me and Sims because the first time I played Sims, I was horrible at it.
How do you kill all your Sims?
Yeah, no, I had 2 survivors.
Okay,
But
that's a win.
but I had no toilet, I had no house, I had no nothing. The father wasn't. They were living on the streets. They literally was living on the streets.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, I had the house. Like
You're showing your household management skills, basically. That's
horrible. horrible. I had literally a bathroom. I had a bathtub outside with no roof, nothing, and I'm like, how is this supposed to be cool? How is this supposed to be fun? But after a while, I got into the game and I understood. Yeah, started to teach me management stuff. But yeah, my first encounters with Sims was horrible. Like.
But it's so much more than that. I think it allows you to just explore imagination, because it's not just about management. We've got cheats for that. Like I've played a lot of Sims with just cheats. It's like you could do all kind of stuff. I've done some sadistic stuff in Sims.
If you want to share, floor is open.
Okay. Should I? Yeah, because it's nameless, right?
Yeah.
Like it's also a very fun way to just like explore death. Yeah, you know, how many ways can I kill a Sim? How many ways have the programmers invented ways for these little characters to die? You know.
So you explored death in Sims.
Absolutely. I killed the entire household, and the game told me, the game buffed me. The game was like, this is a game of life, not death. What are you doing? Like, if you want to hear how I killed them, well, that's a whole nother story.
I mean, hey, it's nameless. Let's go. Let's go for it. Don't already reach here. The whole back.
Yeah, so
because I know in Sims there's this whole big thing about killing
the ladder in the pool.
Yes, the ladder in the pool.
That's a big one. Yeah, when I heard about that, you had to go and experiment with it, right? You had to see how does this work. There's like so many different ways for a Sim to die, and I think that's part of like figuring it out. But one big one is a fire, right? Like you can catch things on fire and watch how things go up in flames. So I invented this room where I put one Sim, a couch, a TV, a stove, a curtain, some mattresses. All those things are like flammable, right? And then a wall, and then like one like glass window. Oh, and a fire alarm that will summon the fireman. made them cook something, distract them with TV, so the oven would catch on fire, burn the curtain, and set the rest of the house on fire while they were watching TV. But the fire alarm would go off, summoning the fireman, who would see the person through the one glass window, unable to do anything.
That is. Why the fireman watching?
Because he's gonna try to do something, but he can't. So he just has to watch the house burn down and then walk away.
No. See, that is the sadistic part about it, because he's helpless to the situation.
Yeah.
But it's quite genius as well too, and very much diabolical. I'm scared. But
that's what it did. You see, don't be watching those girls playing Sims like it's just little dolly playing. We're planning stuff in there.
Yeah. Okay, respects, but what's interesting is that those things you're not gonna do in real life, but you have like a better understanding of like safety precautions because you play with those games. Like, what would you consider about that? Like that whole, diabolical and sadistic, but practical.
Yeah, I for me it is just sort of maybe exploring things in a safe zone too, because there's all these things that your Sims could do that you might be able to do in real life, but you could project yourself on a character and just pretend that you have this life, and you could be like, what if I did this? What would happen? It becomes as like, as kids, that's what we do. We push buttons and we wait and see what happens. And as you become an adult, you realize, okay, there's like all these consequences and things. And I think also games, not just Sims, but games in a whole kind of offer that opportunity of like, what if the world was different? And what if I did this, if I press this and I press that? Like, that's that exploration of what happens if I do this, where you can experience something that you wouldn't get to in your regular life. And that's really what I've always been drawn to, I think, when it came to video games. Is like, what the people who made this, did they think of this? And how can I like figure out how to break their game? So
you are a game breaker. Like, you would have gone into the code and try to
I'm that
botched. No, I've always respected the games. I was always one of those, I guess that would be one of those goody boys when it comes to playing games.
Okay.
I would never try to cheese any way out of it. I mean, I'm a very off meta player in terms of my tactics, but I would have never tried to break any games. I would always try to play within the rules, and even when I lose, I'm like, it's not fair, stuff. But it's like, a game is a game, so winning has always been seemed to be an objective.
Right, yeah, I got that.
What is interesting for me now, like if we fast forward now to like where you are now, how do you see games reflected on that, on your experience?
I found that there's a huge, even wider variety of games than I thought could have ever been possible. So I talked about, I remember like as a kid when I would play that same Tasmanian Tiger game. I played that so many times. I would like imagine, what if you had a role where you could do this? What if you could do that? I was just imagining like an open world game, sandbox game or whatever. And like fast forward to today, and you've got like huge games. You've got like Skyrim and Witcher, and you've got the massive MMOs and stuff, and it's like, oh my god, it's like the fantasy young me would have wanted if I could just like sit down and just do this all day, and so just seeing, I don't know, like that just shift in technology and also the acceptance of games, because it's so hard to like nowadays place gender on games, because we're seeing that girls are playing games more. Like, so when we look at history, right, games were typically associated with boys because they happen to be on like the boys' toy aisle. All right.
You mean video games?
Video games. Okay. Video games. Yeah. I mean, we could go back in the history of like play and competitiveness as a masculine trait, but like that also would have probably influenced like video games on the shelves.
Something that's really interesting here that, again, I'm going to kind of pull this into carnival and traditional play, because there are two types of games out there if you look at it at the core principles. You have the player versus player and then player versus environment principle.
Yeah, okay.
So if I'm going to boil it down into like really black and white terms, and I know life is not really that black and white, player versus player, boy days. Player versus environment, girl days.
Okay.
So I know in terms of like understanding everything in terms of games, because for me, I learned it from traditional. I went from video games to exploring Carnival as a game, exploring my playing experience and exploring myself in this environment, and realizing, oh yeah, well, there's so much there that we haven't even begun to explore in terms of traditions, in terms of games that where did it evolve from it being traditional games to then video games, and then where's that language between traditional games and video games? Because we grew up on video games, and that's the real, and our understanding of video games is just tightly scoped by this market that clearly targeted towards boys in terms of PvP, Tekken, racing, all these competitions.
Yeah.
But they were very limited environmental games, and like Sims is one of them. Like, that was a PvE game, even though you was diabolical in it, but it was it's generally...
I like how you describe not everything's black and white, but it does help give us a base to understand things. So you explain out of it, that's true. Like, even when I play like MMO, I prefer PvE over PvP, right? Like, one MMO like I really like to play with Guild Wars. Yeah.
You ain't out me yet, but okay.
Okay, all right, we'll do that after this. So I rarely go into PvP mode. But yeah, I love PvE, and I think like my whole thing kind of falls into that explorer thing. I love the world for exploring it and unlocking new parts of the map and just seeing little hidden things in the game and stuff, like as if it's a whole living world, you know? Pun intended. And so maybe that does feed into sort of like the whole gender that paradigm too, you know, where because I feel like if we talk about female and masculine energies, I've always sort of been, like as a child I was a competitive person. I think I've softened as the years have gone by, but you know, I was very competitive, so I was really into those kind of stuff. And when we talked about, you know, the boy days and stuff, like I would often, in the ways that I could, I guess, try to compete with the boys, because I don't know, the standing in society seemed like a particular way that if I wanted to achieve certain things, I had to be like the boy. Especially like game design, right? The person I would have looked up to in that would have been male. Even in that little making of video, right, it was mostly male. And even as I grew up and I watched people like talk, I would watch and I would observe how the men move and stuff. Not even realizing that I was like, as a girl watching men do this, but I feel like realizing, okay, like I have to maybe dress a particular way
project
or whatever.
like that male.
You know. And it's just over the years I realized that, you know, I could still be a woman and be it to my feminine self and like still explore my own perspective within games and project that. Because I've had to experience things where it's like I would talk to guys and I'm like, yeah, I like games, and then they're like, oh, so like if you don't like FIFA, if you don't play Call of Duty, you're not a gamer. And it's like,
hey, fuck that.
Yeah, I've been told that.
I grew up in a whole space where FIFA was the main game, and I was the one gamer that was like every other game.
Right.
But they would have never challenged me on games now. My passion on games was every different kind of game and not just solely on FIFA. But I guess that sacrificed some of my boy days, because when we would go over to play games, if they're not playing Mario Kart, I not there. If they're playing FIFA, I not there. Well, no, I lie. If they're playing Mario Kart, I there. If they're playing FIFA, I not there.
Mario Kart is for everybody, yeah.
Okay, so we're looking like we're wrapping up here. Any final points?
Ooh, this conversation was going really well. I didn't realize how much time passed.
I mean, technicals, yeah. We have a budget, we have people, you know. Life is life, so.
Any final points? Well, back down to like this, I think we need to probably change the discussion around like game. Just, it's still in people's mind that it's a masculine thing, but the games are for everybody, because we talked about play and we all grew up playing in our own different ways, and they're all valid ways, because we explore, as I talked about earlier, you know, poking. That's how we learn as kids. We grow up and we learn to play. So if we can create games that appeal, and that's what's happening now, that's why I love indie games, they can appeal to a niche without needing to like all these overheads, and be able to get these really interesting experiences. So as a person, I like to explore all kinds of different games. I'm not really an FPS person, but anything else generally I will play.
Yeah, and I would like to add on that it's not just video games as well, because games were there before video games. We have games like Pitch, we have games like Red Rover, we have games like Brown Girl in the Ring, we have games like Hopscotch, we have we have so much of traditional games that our parents and our grandparents used to play, that they also learned that poking and that observation of the world that can still now apply to us in day-to-day practices. There's so much unpacking from the word game here that there's a lot to explore.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's like perfect ending there. This has been the Nameless Podcast final episode. Thank you guys for listening.
First girl on the podcast.
No, you're the fifth. Take your time.
Oh, well.